No enemy bomber can reach the Ruhr industrial zone. If so, I'm not green, you can call me Meyer. In September 1939, Germany blitzed Poland, and Britain and France subsequently declared war on Germany. Faced with the claim that the Ruhr area of the industrial heart of Germany may be subject to airstrikes, German Air Marshal and Chairman of the National Defense Commission Hermann Göring disagreed and boasted about it at the Air Force Conference. May is a common Jewish surname in the hot air comics, and the meaning of cutting fat is self-evident. At the same time, he promised, "I will make sure that the enemy cannot drop any bombs. It doesn't matter if we ordinary people brag and fuck. We can't brag in public in the identity of green." Not long after, his face was beaten by British Air Force General Arthur Harris. This man advocated the theory of the victory of the bombing mechanism and pioneered the large-scale saturation bombing tactics. He was nicknamed Bombard Butcher. He was a controversial general in World War II. After the 1,000 planes bombed Germany's third, Arthur responded to Green's crazy words with a very classic sentence. In 1892, Arthur Harris was born in the British Empire in his heyday and was the son of colonial officials. "I arranged my son's life early, either join the army or take the civil service exam." But when he was 17, Arthur was influenced by a drama and fell in love with Africa. He dropped out of school and moved to Rhodesia, the British colony, which is now Zimbabwe. In those years, he made a living by mining, driving carriages, and doing odd jobs on the farm, and became a farm manager. If it weren't for the war, he would have planned to start his own farm and live his life in Africa. In 1914, after the outbreak of World War I, Arthur was recruited to join the Rhodesian Legion and participated in the Battle of Southwest Africa as a trumpeter. The German army threw bombs at his troops in the region, and Arthur, who felt the smell of bombing for the first time, was deeply impressed. It turned out that wars could still be fought like this. In July 1915, the war in Southwest Africa ended, but the battlefield in Europe was still anxious. With the idea of doing his part for the empire, Arthur returned to join the Royal Flying Team. "After a year of training, I rushed to the front line of France." During World War I, Arthur shot down 5 enemy planes in the Thorpes Camel fighter, just enough to reach the threshold of the ace pilot. Green is much better than him in this regard. At that time, Green, who was still a thin man, shot down 22 enemy planes. The aircraft's outstanding performance in World War I attracted the attention of all countries, and the United Kingdom established the world's first independent armament air force, Royal Air Force. Arthur, who had already started a family, stayed in the Air Force because his wife didn't like Africa and was promoted all the way. In the early stages of World War II, Italian Air Force General Duhay published the book Theory of Air Control, proposing the Air Force's theory of victory. The core is that whoever controls air supremacy can win. Future war is a total war for both sides to mobilize all resources. They can force the other side to surrender by strategic bombing of the enemy's rear transportation, industrial and communication facilities, high-rise garrisons and other targets. Influenced by the Duhay theory, Britain, the United States, Germany and other countries have focused on developing long-range bombers. However, during the Spanish Civil War, Germany sent a Condor Legion to support Franco. In actual combat, it was found that the Air Force supported and cooperated with ground armored troops to fight, which was much better than bombing city factories alone. In addition, Germany lacks resources and the development of heavy bombers has been put on hold. The UK has established an air force mainly composed of long-range bombers. Arthur is a staunch believer in strategic bombing, believing that bombers are the best weapons to attack the enemy, disintegrate morale, and end war. In the 1930s, the German army rose, and Arthur promoted the military to develop long-range heavy bombers such as Halifax, Stirling, and Lancaster so that they could take off from their homeland to bomb Germany. While serving as Air Force General Staff of the British Middle East Command, he led the development of a rock aviation bomb to suppress colonial rebellion. During the Palestinian Arab uprising, Arthur spoke out loudly, saying, "Dropping a bombshell in every unruly village can solve the problem." This statement shows his combat characteristics, that is, no matter whether the enemy is a soldier or a civilian, it is just one word: bombing. After the outbreak of World War II, Arthur was transferred back to the UK to command the 5th Bomber Battalion and Deputy Chief of Staff of the Air Force. 8 months after Green bragged, during the Battle of France, Arthur commanded 2 squadrons under his command to storm the Ruhr industrial zone for the first time, swelling Green's small face. However, in 40 and 41 years, British bombing data showed that only 1/3 of aircraft could fly within 8 kilometers of German industrial or military targets. The bombing effect was not ideal and could not destroy Germany's industrial capabilities at all. To this end, in February 1942, the British Air Force adopted a new strategy: regional bombing, actually the puppet Manchukuo theory of indiscriminate bombing, with the goal of destroying their industrial labor and people's morale by bombing German urban civilians on a large scale. Arthur, who had long advocated playing like this, was appointed commander of the bomber commander and promoted to air marshal. As soon as he took office, he gave up relatively accurate daytime bombing and changed to night attacks. Under Arthur's command, in March, British bombers destroyed the ancient German city of Lübeck on the Baltic coast. In April, for night attacks on Rostock. In May, Arthur launched the first 1,000 air bombing during the war. Even the second-tier trainer planes were in use. 1,046 aircraft were dispatched to attack the heavy industrial city of Cologne. In this airstrike, the British Army carried out saturation bombing for the first time, and even the number of German night fighters suppressed the German Army's nighttime fighter jets, causing a large number of civilian casualties. Arthur was thus called the Butcher. After the early bombing, he delivered a radio speech and responded to Greene's crazy words. The war started with a naive fantasy, thinking that they could only blow others, but others could not blow them. Lübeck and Cologne were just started. The 8th Air Force of the U.S. Army stationed in Britain has complained about the British's bombing method, believing that it is good in terms of morality or bomb drop accuracy or the daytime bombing effect. Arthur retorted, Allied fighter jets cannot provide full escort for bombers, and the losses caused by bombing their own side during the day were too great. The Americans disagree and are very confident about their B-17 air fortress. Both sides have their own opinions and finally play their own ways. Arthur continued with the huge casualties of the pilot. Indiscriminate bombing at night. 50,000 civilians were killed. The bombing of Hamburg for 1 million people. Let Ruhr steel production drop by 3/4. Ruhr airstrikes fell by 400,000 tons per output. The Berlin bombing that lasted for several years and the Dresden bombing at the end of the war, etc. All of them were made by him. British bombing forced the Germans to bring a large number of aircraft and air defense systems back to their homeland. Effectively cooperated with the Soviet Army's operations. To this end, Arthur was awarded the first-class Suvorov Order by the Soviet Union. Due to the advocacy and implementation of scorched earth bombing, Arthur and his bomber units were controversial. After the war, they were excluded from the celebrations. Not collectively awarded a meritorious service. It means to burn bridges across the river. To protest, Arthur refused to accept the noble enthronement. Until the 50s. Churchill, who was the Prime Minister for the second time, accepted the Baron only after repeated requests. Old age. Arthur defended the bombing of Dresden in his memoir. In 1984, Arthur, 92, died at home. That's all today.